All right, welcome everyone to the HVAC 2.0 show. You can see that I have a different background behind me. I'm in Pigeon Forge, Tennessee this week, talking to you on a Starlink, which thankfully is working well. I wasn't totally sure how that was going to go. We're joined by a number of the crew today. So I'm glad to see you, Reedy. I'm glad you're feeling better this week. So welcome.
Yes.
Always good to see your smiling face. And we got Tanner here to, do some trolling as necessary. Ken to give us a hard time in a very nice, kind of. I'm trying to think of what is it when two countries talk to each other? Diplomacy. He's our diplomat, all of us. Although then we have Abby, who really should be the diplomat up in Canada.
Passive aggressive diplomat.
Howdy.
Aren't they all? I've never
Howdy.
never heard.
Let's get roddy.
And, we got Jeff, who's the man in Indianapolis, and then of course TK to kind of round out the crew. So tonight we wanted to do kind of a follow up on last week where we talked about how do we fix the fact that residential installs are consistently so bad. All of us have seen the train wrecks out there, and we've seen the pictures in the various groups, and it's just ugly. So how do we get so that hopefully 80 or 90% of them aren't just totally awful crap shows, and get to where maybe at least a decent chunk of customers actually get something that they want. COVID passes everything. All right, we're off to the races already. But we wanted this to ask questions as much as anything. We have our opinions, and you have your opinions, and please hop in like this, and I'll try and put it up. And by the way, if you go to streamyard.com/Facebook, you can allow Facebook to see your name. And then we know who it is that's making comments, which is always nice. But we just wanted to explore standards and then oftentimes the standard making organizations out there and see if there might be a path there, because we don't really see one necessarily, but we're very open to being wrong. So if you all have seen some instances where it's worked well, let's see what happens. And Joe, thank you for joining us, Joe Kukinda. So Joe and I had lunch years ago. He's a wonderful pain in the ass. So thank you, Joe. One of my favorite kind of people, a refrigeration guy in Cleveland. And so I believe our bad install issues stem from the mechanical trade mindset. Installation should be led by vetted service experts. We are backwards. Could you type in further about how you would define a vetted service expert? Because I think I'd agree there. Just trying to figure out where all is it that you're coming from. And just to kind of set things off a little bit, we talked last week about what's on this slide, which is this was a nice data set that Jim Bergman and actually his daughter Val was kind enough to give me. It was 800 static pressure readings. That's pretty nationally representative. And I clipped, there were a couple that were like over 1.9, and I'm like, I'm just going to clean those out because very seldom do you see residential that'll push that high. And there were some that were under like 0.01, and I threw those out because we're not going to see pressures that low, not running. And it got this data set here. And one of the big issues that we're seeing right now is that furnaces in particular, in July of 19, it was mandated that they need to use more efficient blower motors, which basically means we can't use PSC anymore. So we have to use X13 and ECM, which can be fine if you don't put them against high static pressure. So DOE was assuming somewhere between 0.3, which was for single wides and double wides, which is kind of hilarious because anyone here who's clocked one knows that they don't see 0.3 very often. And on the high side, furnaces with a coil at 0.65. Reality was that 47% of systems were above 0.7. And that's the consensus point where early failure becomes likely. So you might get 8 years out of the fan motor, but you probably won't get 15 at 0.7. So this is just one metric, and 70% of systems were above half an inch, and almost half of them were above 0.7. So I think all of us here agree that's pretty mediocre. So this is just one metric, and in general, there's upwards of 90% of systems that have a detectable fault. So that means 90% of systems have something significantly incorrect with them. That's a shame. And if you're here watching, I think you're with us that you care about making this better, but there's so many different layers to it. And so we'll at least begin to pull a couple of them apart. So I think we'll probably end with more questions than answers, but we want this to be a discussion. And Joe, an expert who works for the buyer, not the installer. Let's see what else Joe popped in here. Who better to understand all ramifications of fluid dynamics? Area is indeed a fluid, agreed. And all other items required by any installation, you name it, a service tech journeyman type would be the best installer out there. Can you guys figure out what service rec means there? I'm sure it's just service tech journeyman, maybe.
That's what I'm thinking.
So to a large degree, I agree. Fat fingers. Thanks, Joe. It's all good. We all have fat fingers. Don't worry about it. But I think Ted and I are the only ones here that are not service techs. So I'm not a technician. Ted's not a technician. I've gotten to where I know a fair amount, although if you give me a broken system, you're going to get a dumb look, and I'm going to go for YouTube just like a homeowner, or, well, realistically, I'll call somebody here. But everybody else here is very, very good at what they do and technically oriented. So this is definitely a no white shirts group. I'm the closest to a white shirt here, and I don't think many would call me that. So anyway, average install stinks. And one thing I just wanted to bring up the idea of, Abhi is from India originally, and my wife and I got to travel to India and Nepal back in 2012. And one thing that strikes you is litter is everywhere. So like people are having a bag of chips or whatever, and when they're done, they just drop it wherever they are walking. And that sounds crazy, and it looks crazy culturally when you see it. But the United States was actually very much like that not that long ago. The litter laws, I was looking them up, they mainly started hitting in the mid to late 70s. So they're not that old to where that became a social norm to not litter. And they did it by making it really expensive to do so, at least a $500 fine. So I'm not suggesting a fine, but I am using this as an example of, is there a way that we can change social norms within HVAC? And these were a couple of things that we all kind of came up with that matter for improving average retrofit HVAC installs, which are the large majority of what gets done. Because we build about 1 million homes a year. And even if you assume that a lot of those homes have more than one system, I doubt we're doing more than 1.5 million new systems a year, where we're selling on average about 4 million furnaces and 8 million heat pumps and air conditioners combined. So 12 million other systems are going in, with 1 or 1.5 being for new construction. So retrofits are really where the action needs to be. So we build 1 million homes a year, and there's about 100 million existing. So some things that need to happen: client education. If they don't know better, they're going to buy single stage. If we don't know better, we're going to sell single stage. Offering the right system is important. We're arguing for pretty low static pressure in the 0.08 to 0.3 range. Love to hear feedback on that. Evacuating below 200 microns and charge properly to line set length. So those were a couple things that we all came up with. So maybe that's a consensus, maybe it's not, but hop in. And Brian, measure quick with active quality install standard. You know what? I took screenshots of that the other day. We're going to talk about the 310, which is pretty similar to the quality install, the QI. It's a little bit more advanced, but pretty similar. So we're actually going to dive into that one in a minute.
I'm assuming, Nate, that your static pressure spec is for an air handler, not a furnace with a coil.
Correct. Although it is surprising how low you can get them if you size them right. So for you all that have installed a hybrid, what numbers have you seen? Because I very seldom see over 0.5. Jeff, do you see over 0.5 on your hybrids?
It depends if I do a comfort consult or a free quote.
You're talking client education and choosing the right system might matter?
Yeah, that might matter a little bit. So the ones that we do a comfort consult, we see them down 0.3 to 0.4, kind of the highest. And then if we just do like for like swap outs on hybrids, we're still going to see 0.5 to 0.9.
Okay.
If not greater.
So, and you mean every house doesn't need a 4-ton and 100K?
Contrary to belief, that is correct.
And that's what I heard.
That's what Mike heard too.
Oh, one of Jeff's old coworkers is nicknamed 4-ton Mike. Doesn't matter if you got 1,000 square foot house or 4,000 square foot house, you get a 4-ton AC and a 100K furnace. Slices it, dices, but wait, there's more. It'll break.
It's two-stage.
Oh, geez. Yeah, some of them were actually like infinities. So like he's selling nice systems, but it's like, what are you doing to put a 100K furnace in a 1,200 square foot house? I just ran a load on one for a client today. Actually, he's in Wisconsin. So climate zone 6, design temp of -6, backed into his load with energy use and blower door and came up at 17,000 BTUs for a 1,200 square foot ranch in northern Wisconsin, built in the 80s. So just kind of wild. He's done a little bit of work to it, but it's nothing exotic. So he was like, do I do a 2-ton or a 2.5 ton? I'm like, a 2-ton, like I'd even do a 1.5 on your house if it was me, but it's up to you. So anyway, yeah, it's 1,200 square foot house. Do you need a 1.5 ton? You need 18,000 BTUs. You need 100. Don't be 4-ton Mike, people. Please don't be 4-ton Mike. So we wanted to just walk through some various things. I tried to leave this kind of open-ended, but we're going to start. There's been a lot of talk about ACA 310. It's been out for a little while, actually. I think it's like 3 years old. But now that MeasureQuick makes it relatively easy to take the data that you need for it, we wanted to talk about that. Talk about just various standards organizations. Wow. I don't know what somebody's doing on the highway here.
Are the Canadians invading again? What's going on?
You are all like within 90 miles of the border. I don't know what's wrong with you people. You people. But we'll talk about ACA and ASHRAE. Nate, I can certify you. My name's Nate. BPI, Building Performance Institute, ResNet, Lead for Homes, and utility programs. So those are a couple, and then we have a few others in mind that we think actually are helpful.
Are you classifying Energy Star under utility programs? That's not even anymore.
I mean, there's Energy Star for homes, and for new builds, it's not a terrible checklist, but it's still a checklist. Jeff, can you tell us about pencil whipping?
Yeah, which one do you want me to show you? I've got several.
Well, I think we'll do a whole show on pencil whipping one of these days, but have you seen a HERS rated home that had numbers written on it that you blower door tested, and what did you find?
Several in the last few years, absolutely, where they're just going in and changing it so it barely meets that ACH 50. And then when you actually reverse engineer it, you see that they used, a taller ceiling. They manipulated the numbers. So yes, I've seen several just for them to pass. But again, a lot of them are in bed with the builders, so nobody's going to talk about that. Hush, hush. Just pass it and move on to the next one.
Yeah. Wink, so did you find CFM 50 lower door numbers that didn't match what was on the sticker?
Yeah, correct. Yep.
And by how far?
25, 40%.
Yeah. And how accurate is a blower door supposed to be? Less than 5. I mean, maybe less than 2.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, that's not. That's a lot. That's not an accident.
No. I mean, I've never calibrated my tech, which is kind of funny because I've had it for 14 years now. But I've calibrated it against someone else's blower door multiple times. So I view that as calibration, and it was within 1%. And that's not a new gauge. So when you find 25 or 40%, that's not right. But that's a standard, baby. People are going to do it right because there's a standard. Anyway, Abby sent me this earlier this afternoon when we were chatting. So how standards proliferate. Situation, there are 14 competing standards. 14, ridiculous. We need to develop one universal standard that covers everyone's use cases. Yeah. Situation, there are 15 competing standards. I think we've all seen this sort of thing happen. At least sometimes it does collapse. Like we're watching the Tesla charging standard take over right now. And sometimes good things happen, like USB-C. I've got 3 of those plugged into my laptop right now. So there's some things that come out okay. But in the HVAC world, I don't know. Let's talk about, it's actually got 3 names. It's the ACA ANSI ResNet Standard 310. So Jeff, do you want to walk through the different steps here, and then we'll talk about whether this crap gets done or not?
Yeah, sure. So the initial thing that they suggest you do, and it's the same thing, kind of like the quality installation checklist that Brian was talking about there.
Yep.
Design review is kind of the first step. And what do you mean by design review? And what they actually mean is by load calculation. But what's a load calculation mean?
Well, I think this was room by room duct design too. Wasn't that in there when we dug in?
Yeah. So it starts with load calculation, block load, right? Room by room, figuring out all of that. So I'm just curious of what percentage of salespeople across the country actually do that on every sales lead they go to.
0.
Are you trying to say that not all of them do that?
I'm just what's the percent?
I mean,
What's
just
the
do a
people?
manual J and everything will be perfectly fine.
Yeah.
If I had to guess, Jeff, I'd say probably less than 10% at best.
On everyone, 0.
Yeah.
They're-
So
they're-
what
they're
is
gonna
that,
be,
right?
They're going to be leads that they go to. Even the people that do manual J through some software that's really easy, there are going to be leads they do not do manual J.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yep.
As they should. That's going to be a hot take for a lot of people. But,
Right.
I mean, the idea that you should, as the HVAC contractor, that you should be held to every single thing you do should be held to such a high standard to where you should test and do everything regardless. And if someone's not willing to let you do that, and then you should just walk away, it's kind of asinine. I mean, let's bring it back to real world and go, okay, well, what are we there to do? A homeowner
Tanner, I'm in a hurry. Please get me my quote. Tanner, I got to go to dinner. You got 15 minutes.
My system's
Tanner,
not working.
Tanner, where's my
Can you
quote?
come tomorrow?
Really, I'm going to ask you to get out of here now.
I got 3 more guys coming later today. So
that just also scratches off even number 2, right? Who the hell is testing duct leakage? Can we get a hold of RetroTech and TEC and go, hey, tell me how many duct leakage testers you guys have sold? Now,
If they're going to do that, they got to test duct
contractors
leakage outdoors too, because just
Yeah.
duct leakage is not cutting it.
Yeah. So again, who's going to do that?
So now they need to have the blower door, which now they got to do infiltration-based load calcs. They're not going to do that though, are they? So,
And here's the thing, you need to do all this for free. Because that's the only way that you can make this a standard of something that you do at every job. You do it for free, and then you just inflate your costs because that's just an overhead expense, right?
yeah, how could you do this without charging? I mean, you can't. You do all this at every job. There's got to be a way to do it and charge.
And how many homes can you get into if you do that?
If it's a standard, you can't charge, can you?
I mean, you've only got 5 leads to run that day, so what's the problem? Go ahead, do your room by room loads.
Do it 5 times. That's right.
By the way, I like Brian Feeney's comment here. Only if they need a permit, LOL. But like in California, you are required to pull a permit for every HVAC replacement, and upwards of 90% of systems don't. So in our experience, if you rely on enforcement to get the result that you're looking for, you are going to fail. That's my joke for it is you need police to police who then police the police who are then getting paid off by somebody to look the other way. I mean, has everybody here seen a job where you're like, seriously, that got inspected? What the hell?
Yeah.
Because I have.
In which I do have to say, as much as I would love to see work improve and see, people do a lot better work, I kind of like the idea that almost nobody pulls permits and gives government money to a guy to come out and go, you did a good job. We believe in you. I don't know. I kind of like that.
Next up is taxation is theft.
How did you know my next segment? Damn it.
Because I know Chris Fobb. And you two really ought to be brothers.
Chris is the man.
Jeff, you're saying, I'm trying to think if there's any homeowner in the country who knows what this is and values it enough to pay someone to do it, right? So so who's valuing this? Like, what is the value here between contractor and the homeowner? Who recognizes this? Who is doing this? Who are they doing this for?
That's a great question. It's a fantastic question. I'm going to act. Hey, I'll do a study for you. Okay. The next month of homes that I go into, I will specifically ask them if they've heard of this standard. And then I will notate that for you. Okay. So
Deal.
We'll do our own little case study on it.
Goose egg. Well, so Ted and I, we've really only worked with one builder with our practice in Ohio is Ed Kiesel, VKA Built. And Ed is an amazing guy. He's this engineer who just kind of doesn't stop. He's always looking for the details to figure stuff out. So we set it up. We did one with him, and it was just kind of miserable. We undercharged, and the client was a pain in the butt. And it wasn't fun. We've all done that work where you're just like, this just wasn't worth the trouble. And that was how we came out the other side. Like, we don't really want to do it. So we suggested to Ed, well, why don't you offer people a design package? You can either just do the standard HVAC system because you learned enough on that first one of how to do a better duct system and how to air seal the house better. And he got good.
This is where we learned to lean in to offer decline.
That's exactly it.
Because
that's where AB came from.
That client should have been offered declined as opposed to encouraged.
Yes. Yeah, which is taking the responsibility and putting it on their shoulders to either do it or not do it. So he started offer declining after that. And what we did, like 2 more, Ted, and then everybody started declining. We're like, cool. We didn't really like doing the work anyway.
So Brian,
we did like it, but we got what we needed out of it. Like we got 3 great case studies and an understanding of how to properly offer to homeowners a better house, and then when they and then let them choose. Go ahead, Jeff.
Let's say Brian had a comment there. If you want to pull that up, Nate.
Got it.
As standards become a value driver for closing the sale, so it's a sales and marketing strategy. Okay, I guess I mean, the question that I have for that is how's it a value driver if it's something that you're doing for free?
And how's it a value driver if the homeowner hasn't heard of it and couldn't give a rat's ass?
Yes.
Yeah, the client education is so key here.
That was our argument BPI gave. It's like, oh, you'll have these labels on your truck, and you'll have this patch on your shirt, and what was it, 2012? They wanted us to each spend $350 to renew for 3 years or something, and you and I had this conversation with them. Okay, so how is this going to generate revenue to justify the $350? How will it even just cover its own costs? And they couldn't give us an answer.
And therein lies the rub. I mean, I enjoyed the class. The
A
building
lot of contractors only have a couple of certified guys now. They're not running. Everybody that's running a blower door is not certified anymore because nobody's enforcing that.
Yeah. Actually, in my county in West Virginia, they're talking about enforcing it. I was just talking to a contractor the other day. He's like, "I'll put you in touch with the home inspector if you want to do it." I'm like, "I don't want to run around and just pull numbers on houses. I just don't care." So that's not good that I feel that way. But I'm like, that's not worth my time. Like, I'm going to want $500 a test, and they're not going to want to pay it. And I don't really want to do it for less than $500. I just don't. You're going to burn half my day, and I just don't care enough. And that's kind of sucky that I feel that way. But there you are. But it's just like it is code now, but it's not enforced. So we have those challenges. So anyway,
say you get through step 1 and 2, right? So say you get through that. You do that load calculation, and you do that duct leakage testing. So once you get the system installed, my question is, say you do the duct leakage testing and it doesn't pass. What do? Do you just stop the project? You halt it? You completely give up? What's the next step on that? Anyways, say we get that installed.
You probably
Right.
torture it enough so you get the numbers you want, right?
Oh, exactly. That's what
most people do.
What you do is you start pinching on that hose, that's going into the gauge. You just kind of squeeze a little bit. And then when it gives you the number you want, then you take a picture of that.
Don't tell my secrets, Tanner. Stop.
And then you move forward.
So great. You get into it, you get it installed, right? Then you do the blower, you check the blower motor, and you're actually checking the system's airflow. And the measurements they give you here is flow grid, pressure matching, flow hood, static pressure table. That's where we go, hey, static pressure table, right? But there's nothing that talks about that even up front on running to see what your static is to have that comparable difference from before and after. But that's something that we believe in offering. And then, of course, from there, with the measure quick portion is basically the commissioning portion, right? Checking the watt, get the watt, use your watt meter, check that fan, get all of that into measure quick. And, of course, weigh in charge or non-invasive temperature testing with capacity once you have your airflow and everything. So I do agree with those 3 steps there. That should be done with every install. Maybe not the wattage draw. I don't really give a shit about that. But setting up the airflow, double checking duct pressure, and of course making sure the refrigerant charge is right.
Proper commissioning.
But I mean, why do I need the watt? Why do I need to know what that's doing? If you got good static pressure and you weigh it in and you commission it, great.
Yeah, the wattage doesn't matter that much with low static, but I think what's in there is the blower fan goes into the SEER rating. So if you're trying to get close to the rated SEER of the system, because I saw Jim commenting about that on somebody doing a measure quick report recently. They're like, how come it isn't hitting the right SEER? And he's like, well, your fan's pulling 500 watts. So
correct.
That ain't going to work. Like, how do you get a ECM to pull 500 watts?
There's also some bullshit matchups out there where you got to put a 5-ton coil with a 2.5-ton unit just to get a SEER rating. Fuck that. Is that going to fix the comfort issues that I have in the home? I really don't care at that point.
Right.
I'm fixing comfort for people and, offering things. I'm not sitting here trying to sell them on a SEER rating. And most sales guys aren't.
No. Which brings up this question, which is a good one. How much of the issue with oversized system is sales commission being percentage of contract value? What do you all think? I've got my opinion.
I'm going to say minimal because the price differences between our tonnages are not that great.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, it was a couple $100, maybe $400.
Got Austin here.
Yeah, there we go. So Austin's hopping in. Almost 100% of the time, airflow is left on default settings, I've found. Who here has seen a 4-ton air handler, 4-ton drive on a 2.5-ton system still set to 4 tons?
Set to high from factory, baby.
Yep.
Tanner, why's your hand not going up, buddy? Are you just trolling us now?
Well, you're talking about furnaces. I don't know what you're talking about. You said 4-ton drive, and I'm like, why is this 4-ton driving? This makes no sense.
Everybody knows high-speed fan is for air conditioning and low-speed is for furnace.
Duh.
Everybody knows it.
Oh, yeah. Actually, the first time I learned that one was the Habitat for Humanity project that I did, and it was a 1.5 ton system. I think it was just a 3-ton drive, but it was a 2-ton. It was a 2-ton two stage, and we turned the thing on, and it sounded like the house was going to come unglued. It was just like rattling. It's this little tiny 700 square foot house. It didn't even have 1.5 tons of ductwork. We just couldn't fit it. It had this tiny crawl space, and it was a miserable job. Like, what the hell's going on? And I just didn't know at that point. This is what, 2014, 2015, something like that. And I call the installer, who's a friend of mine. He's like, I'll be right over. Yeah, they didn't change the dip switches. So it was still running like 3.5 tons of airflow on a 2-ton system. And I didn't know to check static or anything there, but I can bet that it was over an inch, judging by the noises it was making. That was an unhappy system. And in air conditioning mode, it was quite warm coming out of the vents. So you know that it wasn't set right. So yeah, so we can agree that steps 3, 4, and 5 are good. So I put in here, Ted mentioned duct leakage outdoors. Like, if you're going to do duct leakage, I really want to know duct leakage outdoors. Duct leakage, we're maybe a little bit weird for saying this, but like Ted and I in northern climates, we don't really care that much about duct leakage unless we aren't getting anywhere near enough airflow into certain rooms, because our ducts are almost exclusively inside the envelope. So it's nice to have, but it isn't necessarily absolute top of list. If you got ducts in attics or crawls, Tanner, all of a sudden you care a great deal more about duct leakage because it's the outdoors.
Now, I've personally seen duct leakage in the envelope, even where it's a basement, and the basement is 5 to 10 degrees cooler. So it can play a factor into that. But I would agree, duct leakage outside is going to be
we had a duct leakage. Well, a lot of duct surface area too. Problem. So yes, you got a lot of duct down there. Even if it's indoors, you may want to pay attention, but
it's less important to indoors. It's to the outdoors I really want to have an understanding of. And so, Jeff, you were talking about the steps. I just screenshotted it from a website here. So the key things are HVAC system design, and this is a HERS rater supposed to do it, evaluation of the HVAC design performed by design professional. So this is somebody else looking over the shoulder of a design professional. Who's going to pay for that? And then the second one measures duct leakage according to ResNet standard 380. So it's, I don't know, those steps just don't get done. And there's...
Well, here's the thing. Go back a screen real quick.
Great.
Because even if you check the duct leakage, right, and it's leakier than recommended, and it fails, I can't move to the next step.
Yeah, right.
Who gives a shit? I mean, the homeowner may not even care. They're saying, why are we caring more than they care? And again, we offer and let them make that decision. We have adult to adult conversations. This is just.
Yeah, well, it really feels like everybody's had that situation where you're working for somebody and the guy who's your boss cares nothing about what you do. They just go, hey, go do this and just get it done. They have zero care of like the process of what it takes to get there. What does it matter? What are the steps? It's just like, just do it right. Like, easy. Just go do this. Just go do that. And it kind of takes the whole emotion out of it, which is really the crucial part when it comes to what we do, because nothing happens unless the homeowners want to do it. Unless you're in there, bending their arm backwards, which if you do that, nobody likes you anyways. So no further to go any more on that. But if they're not on board with going, hey, I understand why I need this and why I want it, so on and so forth, and we're not actually looking at the real thing of, hey, this person has a system that they care nothing about, and the thing they do care about is being comfortable not having to deal with any type of air quality issues, being sick, all this other stuff. They just want to be in a house and forget their system doesn't exist. They don't care about what their leakage is. They don't care about what are all these numbers and how does it compare to others and this and that. They're just like, hey, I'm paying you to make me comfortable. I don't care about anything else. And so it's adding all of these extra things that doesn't really matter, and there's no actual pathway as to why they would matter to anyone other than the person writing these steps.
But what does comfortable mean?
Oh, I don't know. Goes back to the homeowner. What do they call comfortable? What does comfortable mean to them? Because it changes from person to person.
This is all designed to keep a big circus running. And the circus is the government intervenes because manufacturers tell them to, and manufacturers tell the contractors to do stuff. And they lie to the customers, and they lie to their technicians, and they lie to themselves, thinking they're doing something. And 20 years later, nothing is going to be accomplished as a result of any of this. It takes someone who has a little bit of integrity and looks forward and doesn't take responsibility for things that they don't need to. This is all a tremendous waste of time. That's my positive outlook on this.
Now, keep in mind that Reedy is by far the gentlest and nicest of all of us here.
Yes.
by a pretty large margin. So when Reedy Ward sounds jaded, it's not a good thing.
No.
So, I mean,
he's our guiding compass. If he's going that way, we're like, hey, Reedy, we're with you, man.
Behind you all the way. Yeah, it's kind of wild. So there was only one software package doing this. I think there might be two now with MeasureQuick and mandatory training. This article is from a couple of years ago, but only HERS raters or rating field inspectors who are standard 310 certified may apply the standard. So that drops us to just a handful of people in the country that technically are supposed to be doing this standard. I think that's probably widened now with MeasureQuick, but I'm not 100% sure. But the key piece of all of this is the design work that needs to be done. It's so seldom going to be done on a retrofit install that I don't even think it even begins to like bump the needle, like 0.1%, 0.2%, maybe. I mean, it just doesn't matter for retrofits, and that's the vast majority of the market. And then in new construction, who here has been absolutely appalled by the quality of a new build duct system? I mean, like, my jaw hit the floor, and I threw up twice. You know, like they're awful. I don't want to buy a house in a southern market in particular where they wedge flex duct between the first and second floors, because I've seen those. They're like, hey, we'll do a 180 here and a 360 here, and I'm like, what are you gonna get? 10 CFM? Oh, that 6-inch duct maybe on a good day. And how do you fix it? You pull the ceiling down. I mean, it is no joke to get in there and fix it. I'd rather have it in the attic, even though that's outside the envelope and comes with other things. At least I can see it and change it. So I really don't want a new build house in the Southeast US, or really the Southwest if they're doing that either. I have zero interest. You could give me one, and if you didn't make me stay there and live in it, I'd resell it as soon as I could. That's a shame, because it's not that hard to even do it halfway decently, or just put it in the attic. So anyway, if we take retrofits off the table, and in new build, my bet is probably no more than 1 or 2% penetration of 1 million a year. So congratulations, we are doing 1,000 or 2,000 systems a year of somewhere between 8 and 12 million systems a year that are being done. Go team.
Yeah. Even on the high-end homes, custom built.
Yeah. I mean,
well, the high-end ones are worse oftentimes. I mean, either the multi-million-dollar homes are the worst HVAC systems you've ever seen, or they are the best HVAC systems you've ever seen. There's like no in the middle. There's no mediocre or just okay. They're either really, really bad or they're really, really good.
Oh yeah. Well, I mean, it really comes down to the problem is if you're trying to really reach market penetration, you're having to reach the masses. And the problem is the masses of homes being built, they're built specifically to sell and make money. And so anytime when you're doing something like that, the first thing a business person does is analyzes and goes, okay, what are the things that do not result to a bottom line, increase, and get rid of that. And what are those things? Everything that makes a house function well. Let's put the money into making it bigger. Let's put the money into making it look pretty, and let's put the money into where it's going to be. Everything else doesn't matter. And so when you have that type of scenario, there's just not a way. The only way that changes is people actually have to start to value the things that will make the houses better, and to let that drive the marketplace, because market is going to dictate everything. And right now the market is not asking for that.
And when there's a complete disconnect between any sort of raters, the builder giving goals and targets, and then the HVAC people all guessing, we just end up with this big shit show.
Oh yeah.
What are they trying to fix?
Yeah, what's the goal?
What is this like? Oh, like we have these problems out here, so we'll just throw shit against the wall and hopefully that'll magically fix stuff.
The nice thing is, see, we got to look at the positive. Is we're all going to have a hell of a lot of work. So thank you.
Yeah, buddy.
We're very thankful and grateful for that.
God, the homeowners. It's going to be so expensive to own a home because people are just never going to be able to keep up with all of this.
It's hard. But what do you mean by LCD here? Masses equal LCD?
Lowest common denominator.
Oh, there we are. Thank you. Yes. Agreed then.
Hey, Nate, back it up one slide.
Mm-hmm.
For what? Let's see. We've got it's ACA ANSI ResNet. I propose just abbreviate that to R.
That's what it needed. That was the real problem. Ken just solved it. It's going to work great now.
Done. Millions of homes a year. Game set match. All it needed was a rebrand. Thank you, Ken. Funny. So, I mean, my gut, and I don't know if anybody else here agrees, is we're going to be talking like 1,000 homes a year that are going to get this standard. Does anybody else think we're going to significantly beat that? I mean, 10,000?
I don't think you get to 1,000.
I don't either.
I don't even know we get there.
I don't think you get to 1,000 because this is going to require a workforce that doesn't exist.
Yeah. And also some sales.
I mean, Austin, can you do that? Could you do all of this?
So talking to Austin Inman here. Austin, do you know how to do all the design and testing and stuff that's in here? And I mean, you're an above average tech. So
yeah.
So everybody knows Austin is one of the newer HVAC 2.0 acolytes. He did an interview with Nate a couple weeks ago. HVAC 2.0 process is really, really improving his life. So this isn't something that, and would you want to?
He says no.
And would you even be interested in learning how to do all this stuff?
And do it for free.
Even if you got paid.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the real, like the issue is that it adds hurdles. And so the real question is, okay, let's everybody imagine you're a business. You've got to hire somebody. It's just you and you're about to make your first hire and you're going to try to do work like this. Where are you going to go to find somebody who you can now get on board to following something like this, which is even more difficult than what is currently there? And so the way that you make people start adopting things is to make that process easier. Remove the restrictions, remove the hurdles. But when you start kind of adding more hurdles, it doesn't really help anything. And what sucks is the real answer is that, okay, well, just provide information and education for people who want to do better work, to enable them to do better work and do it in a way in which is actually beneficial. But the problem with that is you're not going to reach everybody, and the only way you kind of go about that is just to actually stop and go, okay, I have to understand that there are going to be people out there who do not care about doing good work. They don't care. They could care less. If anything, it pleases them to do crappy work and get away with it. There's nothing you can do about it.
Yeah, this isn't going to fix that. The other thing is, won't this add like $3 to $5 grand to every job?
Oh, yeah.
And how many
if they would
days?
pay for it? Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
The problem is people will always go to Chuck in a truck because the money is to be made in selling equipment, not in doing the design. So when you sell a box, you've made your money and you move on. And that's what people have come to expect now.
And we're learning now that the HVAC 2.0 sales process is getting used by some of you guys like Reedy and Jeff quite a bit, actually. You can offer design to people, but and people can have frustrating problems with their homes. Like 30% of people you ask will have high levels of frustration with the way their homes perform. Would you all agree?
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
I'm pretty confident that those numbers, people are having a score above 18 on the comfort quiz, which we've determined is a motivatingly high score. Motivates them to make changes. And so if it's 30% have some motivation, but now that the free quote process is working, only 10% are actually getting comfort consults. Jeff sold his first comfort consult for his new company today. Congratulations. But that's after, that's 1 in 14
15.
leads so far.
Yeah, 14. Yep.
So, that's 7%. And of those 14 leads, a fair number have had reasonably high comfort quizzes, right?
Mm-hmm.
So maybe 1 in 4 that has an over high number is actually going to do some diagnostics and design. And this is $500. This isn't 4,000.
Yeah.
That's why you do it for free. Did you not remember that last part?
Yeah, right.
Come on, Ted. What the hell's wrong with you?
I know. Sorry.
Come on. We're all just totally losing the thread here. Naturally, we all work for free, right? So Austin hopped in here, and I've heard this story many times before too. I had $1 million house with a furnace that wouldn't stop tripping limit due to crappy duct design and undersized ductwork. The builder's solution was to disable one of the burners. Go team! That's the kind of crap that we normally see, and all of us here, like, we are all pretty nerdy in what we do. We really give a damn about the work that we do, and we're all looking at this and being like, no freaking way. That's not a good sign. When the super nerds are being like, whew, that's a little steep. That's not a good sign. So while I understand the idea and the thrust behind this, our bet is $1,000 a year on the high side. So
I just feel like they're just looking at a problem and they're just grabbing the wrong tool to deal with the problem.
That's exactly it. They're grabbing a screwdriver. They're grabbing a hammer when they need a screwdriver.
Yes.
Well, what is that about the guy? Like, what is it?
Actually, they're not even thinking about the problem.
What is that Groucho Marx line?
The
Is that
Groucho
the one
Marx
that-
line is, there's many, but maybe the one you're thinking of is, I don't ever want to join a club that would allow me as a member, or something like that.
That's one of them. But that one, I just looked it up. It's politics is the art of looking for trouble, finding it everywhere, diagnosing it incorrectly, and applying the wrong remedies. What's that sound like right here?
I have a theory as to how these standards come about, and I'll put it forward, and you guys tell me what you think. A group of people get together, right? Just like we have today, and you start with the premise that 90% of HVAC installs are being done wrong. So what can be done about it? And there's two ways to go about this, right? One is through norms, and the other is through rules and or standards. And I think norms are harder to get right, but stick around for a lot longer. And
Yes.
rules are easier to define and codify, but very difficult to implement in practice. And I think what happens is when groups of people, well-meaning perhaps, people get together, it's easier for people to come up with a set of rules and standards that they think everyone, perhaps like themselves, would find it easy to follow, and or would find it natural to incorporate into their own business process. But I don't think they spend enough time thinking about, okay, if we have these rules, so the rules are like the floor, right? They're the minimum expectation, and then the norms are things that are cultural practices that get embedded over time. I've told this story before. I think I moved from India to Michigan to go to grad school, and my first Thanksgiving break, one of my buddies invited me to go visit his family with him. So we drove for about 12 hours to go from UP, Upper Peninsula, Michigan, to downstate Michigan. And when we got to his place at like 7 p.m., his mom, as soon as we walked in, his mom asked, "Are you guys hungry? Do you want something to eat?" And I said no, because that's the norm in India. Is when someone asks you, "Are you hungry?" You say no. It's not a rule, right? It's not written anywhere, but it's just a common practice. And when I said no, their norm was take people at their word. And so they never asked me again if I was hungry. And I was so embarrassed to ask for food that I lied and I said I'm going for a walk. And I went and had a frozen burrito. I microwaved a frozen burrito at a gas station. That was my supper that night. And so it took me a long time to understand that the norms of this new country that I called home for a long time were different from the norms I grew up in, right? And so how do norms change and how do we enforce uniform norms? It's hard. I think you have to kind of lead with example, demonstrate value and case studies where people are leading with that practice, and that practice other people try to emulate it, and then that's how it becomes a norm. But those things take a lot of time and they take a lot of active practice, and you have to demonstrate success before other people pick it up. And I think that with these standards, I think that maybe people who come up with these standards, that's what they're missing. Is I've seen like videos and stuff where people show how to use the standard, but I'm yet to see someone demonstrate how the standard adds value to both the homeowner and the contractor. And unless people do that, these standards will never become the norm, I think.
Well, and they're also doing it for themselves and for the unicorns, as you may call it, and not the masses or the lowest common denominator.
Right.
So as you build a standard or you build something, you should also be thinking of how can I impact the most amount of people, not me and my buddies and my 1%.
That's
Because
right.
you'll never influence or fix or change anything. And sometimes you'll set it back decades, years or decades.
Yeah, and actually that's a good point, Jeff. So in a way, maybe these standards are not meant to be a kind of a floor. They're meant to be kind of like a gatekeeping thing, right? Like this is the stuff that me and my buddies can do. So therefore, we're going to give ourselves a new standard, and then we're going to say that is the new way that everyone should aspire to do, without clearly articulating a value proposition that everyone can kind of aspire to or to incorporate into their business.
You're making me crack up. There's a funny joke. Have you heard about the book I'm about to come up with? It's called Humility and How I Achieved It. So yeah, it can be that. And now to be fair, I got to poke fun at myself as well, and Ted as well. We have both been home performance boneheads for many years, and I think we dragged you all along to some degree, and we're home performance boneheads as well. Where we hyper focus on doing things super duper well, but we end up playing to a very, very small audience that in the end can't move the needle. So the adoption curve, it's a bell curve. And to get to the fat part of the bell curve, we need to hit that lowest common denominator as best we can. And I mean, that's been our goal the whole time in trying to develop out HVAC 2.0. But now with the free quote process, we actually can reach that side of things. But it's so hard because to some degree we need to reach a bunch of people that don't really care. And back to 310 here, If we are a bunch of people here who really give a damn. I mean, my dad cracked me up. He'd look at something that was done really badly, and he'd point it out and be like, well, that guy's give a shit or ran down. All of ours are very strong here. All of us really give a shit about what we do and the work we do. And we all look at this, we're like, why? This is dumb. That's not a good reaction from the leading edge. So how do we actually find a way to, like what you were saying, move the norms? So how do we change it from where are you hungry? The correct answer is now no. And like, well, no, are you hungry? Like, because I think you told me about it. And part of that idea was to basically have people beg you to, like, as hosts, to serve you food, right? So routinely you'd ask 2 or 3 times as a host.
Yeah. I think it is the first time they ask you in India, you'd say no. Second time you say no, and the third time you go, oh well, if you're going to twist my arm, I guess I'll eat your food, you stupid food. I don't know why we do it. I honestly don't know, but that's the part of the thing about the norm, right? Like, who knows how these things come about, but they're just broad cultural.
I mean, running back to where we started at, like littering was not the norm in the U.S. The norm for a long time was to throw stuff out the window. And you know that's just how things were. And then somewhere in the 70s, that turned to where it is not really a thing anymore. And now if you throw something out the window, you're probably going to get honked at. I've honked at people for throwing their cigarette wrappers, the plastic cellophane out the window. Like, what are you doing? That's stupid. So in large part, I think we have to find a way to change the norms. And frankly, I don't know how the hell to do it. We can do it to some degree through the system that we're building here, but we're just one corner of a large industry. How does this change overall so that 90% of systems don't have something that you can easily detect is wrong with them? You know, bad airflow, bad charge. I mean, it's going to be tough to test for acid, but you're going to find a lot of that in the refrigerant. Wrong size, you know, all of the high static pressure, like all of these different things. How do we actually move that around?
I mean, the real question is what's the real goal? Like, are we looking to just make it better, or are we trying to fix it 100%? Because I don't know how valuable it is to chase an unachievable goal is. And is there going to be something lost in that process? And so if we just kind of look at it, because, I mean, let's be honest, the only fix really is homeowners have to want better work. And of course, everybody's going to be like, oh, well, everybody wants good work. And it's like, oh, have you ran many free quotes before? Have you ran into those people who go, what, you can't install a system for $4,000? I mean, there's a consensus as to what people actually want. People will say all kinds of things, but when it comes to actually putting a dollar to it, then it really changes. So until the true wants change, people are going to be giving them out. You're going to have those chucks in a truck who go, hey, don't go spend $10,000 with this other company. I'll do it for $5,000. That guy's too appealing to too many people for 100% of the work to change. So I just kind of feel like all you can really do is really assess what's really achievable and go, okay, these are the types of people who, like the ones that are really hurting are the ones who actually want to have good work done. They have problems they really want to solve. They're ready to spend the money to do it, but there's just nobody around to do it for them. Like, that's a real problem. And I mean, the solution to that is we just, as an industry, you know, start really holding more people accountable, trying to really push education, blah, 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 and just make that more accessible. But to really solve all the problems, I feel like we're just chasing something that's unachievable in that.
Yeah, and I don't think that's it. I don't think you're never going to get 100% right.
Yeah.
So I agree with that. So it's just making it better and, you know, getting in that right direction, but don't exclude 90% of people.
Yeah.
Once you start excluding that amount of people, then you've created a shit show and shot yourself in the foot. Good luck recovering from that. Measure
Oh,
quick.
Oh boy.
Oh,
One of the ways that I view this is thinking of that bell curve. Can we push it, like if this way is good, can we move that bell curve to where it clusters towards the higher side? Because we're never getting rid of Truck in a Truck or Beer Money Bob, which I hadn't heard that. David Dayer just put that in. I chuckled a little bit as I saw that one pop up. So David's in Minneapolis, and actually he commented earlier, just to run back. It's slightly off where we are at the moment, but he said a while back, mind blowing what I see here in Minnesota. Still building my development and starting another 500 homes right behind ours. They aren't even sealing ducts, and he's got the 2015 energy code, which is a pretty good code. If you read that, that builds a pretty good house if you actually follow it. But it's not getting followed in Minnesota, which is a pretty rules-based state. Like you got a lot of Scandinavians and a lot of Germans who are very rules-based cultures. When there's a joke
and a
about,
place where it gets cold enough, it matters.
yeah, exactly. Yeah, and that's legit climate zone 7 or 6, pushing 7. But like in German culture, the joke is if it is not permitted, it is forbidden. So es ist verboten is like a really common phrase. Like you just don't do that. And so we have a rules-based culture, or people from a rules-based culture that are ignoring the rules in new builds. And like these are rules that are very, very similar to this ACA 310. And it's not happening. And certainly I've heard plenty of stories of it just not happening in various parts. But in any case, how do we begin to move the norms? Because like litter still happens. I live in a holler in West Virginia. I still see Bud Light cans. I'm still kind of blown away that I still see Bud Light cans after the debacle a couple months back. But I still see new Bud Light cans just thrown out the window in our little community. So like you're not going to stop the littering. But if you go to India, like you'll be blown away by how much stuff is on the ground. Like it's just garbage everywhere, and it's just a cultural thing. Like I'm not throwing stones or anything like that. It's just cultural because we used to be the same way in America, but we changed that norm.
You're not throwing stones because that would be littering, Nate. But I have a perspective here, I think, and I think it's important to think about what is the scale of change you're envisioning, right? And I think thinking like giving yourself the goal that you will change the entire industry, you'll change the norms of the entire industry is perhaps a bit much. I don't have that kind of hubris. Certainly, don't expect that to happen within my lifetime. But what you can do is I think you can exert just a soft influence on the people around you, right? Jeff recommended a book. It's called Quiet. It talks about introverts and extroverts, but actually makes a surprisingly salient point that has stayed with me for a long time after I read it. It talked about like the difference between cultivating personality and cultivating character, and how as a society we've gone from a culture of character to a culture of personality. And personality is like outwardly visible things that you do, and character is like inner building of yourself. And I think that I'm thinking about what Austin said about earlier in the comments. He said accountability and pride in work and stuff like that. And I think that a lot of the things about taking pride in your work and taking ownership of stuff, I think it sounds great on paper, and those are good values that we should aspire to, and I think they can be a part of cultivating character. But the challenge there is some people don't know what the parameters of that are, and there's a very thin line between taking pride in your work and being the hero, and going too far, and trying to solve other people's problems, things like that. And I think ultimately what you can do is to do those things, like build character, show other people how it's done, and do it profitably, and do it in a way where you're making more money, having better relationship with clients, where you're going home earlier than others, taking more time off, spending more time with family, and just living a better life. And I think that's where you can set new norms. I know, a lot of people here have led other people into this HVAC 2.0 process, right? And that is changing norms in some ways, because you're setting a new standard for yourself and what you can expect out of job, and what numbers you can expect out of job, what kind of job satisfaction you can expect. I think that's as much as you can do, really, is to live a life of quiet dignity that matches with your values, and hope people who notice have a pathway to follow in your wake. Anything more than that is just giving yourself too much to chew, too much to bite.
So that's wise, Hobby, because part of me wants to change it all, but that's also being the hero. I mean, so we have control over one person in our lives, and that's ourselves, and we only have influence beyond that.
And a mentor of mine once said that, hey, look, I can teach a full room, and if I only get one or two that actually take it in, I'm excited because I got that one or two.
Mm-hmm.
You're not going to get them all, so you have to be excited with what we do get, and those little changes will inevitably make big changes if we continue down that path. So I agree, Abhi.
Yeah, the hard part here, Jeff, is that I have a friend, and he's not in the HVAC, but he's in another skill trade. He takes a lot of pride in his work, does really good work, but he's such a bad business person. I mean, I hope I'm not going to name names, but like, it just doesn't really make the right business decisions. Like, just gets in way over his head, gets overwhelmed. That's not helping anybody either, right? Those are not norms either. So there's got to be, I think, taking pride in your work, and paying attention and taking a personal interest are all useful qualities, but those need to be moderated by the fact that you like, not my monkey, not my circus, and you can't care about this problem more than the homeowner. Like, I think those are the kind of like the weights that balance the scale on the other side. uh, my syllabus is just HVAC 2.0 and Sandler, so um is those act as like a countervailing um force against these like natural tendency towards, going too far into taking pride in your work, so much so that you're trying to act like a hero and you're biting off more than you can chew. And I think that finding that balance is how you change norms.
Well, this is a kind comment.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
That is
I
our
don't know
hope.
who that is. That's what we're hoping to do. And it's what's challenging here is Ted and I started in the home performance bonehead side of things. Like, what you do anything other than Rolls Royce installs? What the hell's wrong with you? You're just a bad person. That's where we began, and I remember telling people that, and then being like, "You sell Chevys? Like, you're just an awful human being. What's wrong with you?" And I look back on that now, and I'm like, humility and how I achieved it. Man, it's just hard, and it's the spectrum that we all have to walk through, and it's hard.
Well, and Jeff in his new job is doing a lot of free quotes, whereas before his prior job, really all he ever got were comfort consults. So, like, it's been interesting to watch the pivot. Nate, he's done the pivot we took a decade to do. He's done in a couple of months.
Yeah, it's been incredible. And I mean, Reedy, you've been out there running free quotes.
We've seen some pictures of some of the installs those crews have done with Jeff's jobs.
Yeah, let's just not go there.
Well, you're right. Sorry, Jeff.
We'll just say they were not what we were hoping for.
The thing is that if you ask some of those installers who installed that work, they would probably say it's quality work. You just can't legislate quality or morality or anything like that. A person's got to pick, what kind of man am I going to be? What kind of woman am I going to be? And when they get to that place,
that's broken. It's hard to fix, and there's only so much one person can fix, right?
Right.
Yeah. But I also think back to, I can't think of his name, Seth Godin, marketing guy. He talks about find the smallest tribe of raving fanatics that you can make a living on and serve them as well as you can. And that's basically what we're looking at here in this group. And then you start looking at adjacent tribes and jumping. And so you gradually grow the pie from there. So that's part of what I have in my mind. But Abby, to your point, sometimes I definitely step back and I'm like, I want to change it all. I want it all. Take over the world. And like, no, like, and that's when I think about that. I just kind of tap out. I had a conversation earlier today with a friend, like, so IRA is going to have these really detailed rules, and it just sets me off when I think about that. Like, no, I'm not going to help them figure out how to put rules on a shitty system. I just don't care. But it makes me feel like we're trying to shift something significant there. And I'm like, but you're making our lives harder. And so that puts me in a mode where I feel like I need to be the hero. And I get to where I tap out and like I just get mad and I just want to leave. And
this is the same thing. Are we going to go through some of these other?
Honestly, I think we kick it to next week. We're well over an hour already. So
okay.
We this has been a good conversation and lots of good comments coming in here. So we were intending to talk about some different organizations, standards organizations, and then a couple that were that we view as being helpful on this. So they're very helpful on the technical front. But I do want to.
So mention the couple that we're going to talk about next week that are helpful.
Well, NCI.
There are going to be a bunch that aren't, but there are some that are.
NCI. Well, let me just click through because I have to remember. I can't remember what the third one was. Let me. Is that you playing with my slides there, Ted?
ESCO.
Not me.
ESCO.
Oh, that's weird. Why is it? Oh, here we are. I can do this.
We talk about RSES, ESCO, and NCI.
Thank you. Yeah. So yeah, I don't know what the slides are being weird, bouncing back and forth. I don't know why that's doing that.
Oh, there you go.
Well, those are the ones that we don't find are helpful, and then
okay.
it's the ones at the very, very end that. So National Comfort Institute, ESCO, and RSES. So the technical side of things, it's very important, but we have a chicken and the egg problem, because if the sales guy sells an oversized system and no duct mods, what's that system going to come out as?
Crap.
Bad or worse. Like the good is not on the menu if that happens. So we have this challenge of what do we do there? So the technicals is important, and it's something that definitely needs to get taught, as like watching a couple of Jeff's installs. You're too far now.
Okay.
There was NCI. Tune in next week for the exciting conclusion.
Right? Same bat time, same bat channel. So yeah, we shouldn't have even started flipping through the slides. So at least Jeff remembered RSES. That was the one that wasn't coming to my mind. But there's definitely some things that need to happen here. Although this is actually a really good slide to end with here. This is a book that really messed with my mind, and I highly recommend that anyone in the HVAC world listen to it. You can read it if you want, but if you're like me, I'm not good at finishing nonfiction. Part of which is 200-page books are really 20 pages of content that's fluffed to 200 in general. Although this one didn't feel that way. I really like
that's
this one.
not 200 pages though. I was looking for my copy. That's actually
this
a pretty
one's like,
small one.
Yeah, it's like 150 or something. But Atul Gawande here, you worked for his parents, I think, right, Ken?
Yeah.
Same parents, HVAC?
Yes.
Yep. So what, they were professors? Something like that?
Doctors.
Okay.
Yeah.
So Atul is a surgeon, and a pretty good surgeon at that, who grew very frustrated at the large errors in surgery that were easily preventable. Like, do we have the right patient? Are we about to operate on the correct limb? Be it right hand or left hand, whatever it might be. And so he created this simple checklist of, 8 different things that reduced surgery errors by something like 90%. And he's like, at the end of the book, he's like, here's a week of my practice. I did a dozen surgeries and I caught 4 errors with this checklist. You'd think that the guy who invented the checklist wouldn't screw up. He's like, but look, I screwed up too. And
That's
a lot
the
of
point
what
of
we
this,
do,
using a check, like pilots. Like
Yeah.
they always use a checklist. I use a
That's a big
checklist
part of it.
because it catches things.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And that's,
exactly.
and that's what our process was designed to do. Our process is designed to help people catch problems if they want, which is the ultimate thing. It's like we don't live in communism. This isn't telling homeowners what they have to do in order to have somebody else's idea of a perfect house. It's asking homeowners what's imperfect about their house. It's a totally different mindset than these assholes.
well, and frankly, Ted, you and I were those assholes for a while. So
Yeah.
it's a spectrum where you run out. I mean, it's what is it, the Dunning-Kruger? We all do it
Right.
some. You start learning something, you go to the peak and think, I know it all. And then you start learning, you're like, oh,
Everybody
geez,
needs to have a blower door. Everybody should have a blower
well-
door. Everybody has to have a blower door. I was that
Yeah.
guy. We
Yeah,
fall,
all of us here.
and then you realize that not everybody has to have a MRI, EKG, full blood workup. I mean, you're not going to do that on a perfectly healthy 22-year-old. Can you imagine what would happen to our medical system? Everybody entering it had to have this crazy list.
It'll be like Canada.
Canada. or as Elon Musk says, anal.
Albie's like, I'm out.
No, Obby's like, you guys are trying to get me in trouble. I wish you'd be quiet.
Does it say Abby from Canada? Sorry, I'm Al from Canada.
The dude from Canada.
You better put a little more twang on the end of that if you want to
We're
push
gonna
that
have
persona.
we're gonna have to get a picture of Elon in his Canada shirt. That was on Twitter today.
So, well, to try and close this out a little bit, like this book, I do really, really seriously recommend reading or listening to it. Definitely listening to it because I think most of the people here have a lot of windshield time. So if you like podcasts, do books here and there, and this is a good one. And he talks about how checklists are really good for helping us not think about the easy stuff. Like, do I have the right patient and am I about to cut off the right piece of the body? And then you can think more about the details of the other things you need to do so that then you can consider the static pressure or the
You
charge.
can think better. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. This
I mean,
is about not thinking about the small stuff.
Exactly. You take all the
Because
small stuff off the table.
The checklist takes care of the small stuff. You're confident that it takes care of the small stuff. Just like the comfort consult takes care of asking all the right questions so that you can actually pay attention to the body language of the human being across the kitchen table.
Exactly. Or in the free quote, the questions help you make sure that client doesn't have other stuff that they want to get done. So a lot of 2.0, like I read this or listened to this and I'm like, that's what we're doing. That's really kind of wild. And Jim Bergman said this largely inspired MeasureQuick as well. So this book can mess with your mind. And his main point is, look, checklists are not for the dumb. They're for the smart so that the smart can work on the hard stuff. And so this might be part of changing the norms is can we have a basic checklist of things that help improve our installs where we don't have to think about some of the easy stuff.
Checklists are good for teams as well. So anybody on the team can ask a question about it and call a halt.
While we're talking about this, Jeff and I have built a warranty comfort consult for techs. So it's actually follows the traditional sales comfort consult process, except it removes a lot of the stuff that you don't need because it's not for sale. But it's for figuring out what's wrong, why it's wrong, who's responsible for it, and helping understand how to create fair to the homeowner and fair to the contractor resolution.
That'll be exciting when we actually get
That
to roll that out.
silenced everybody. We could probably close on that.
So,
See you
well,
next
everyone,
week, everyone.
Thank you for coming.
Thank you.
And we'll keep diving into this whole idea here. If I can get Ted, are you clicking through again? I'm trying to get to
No,
the end.
I'm not. No.
I don't know why it's doing that. That's just weird. Anyway, thank you everyone for coming to just talk about, could standards be a piece of the puzzle? And the consensus with us is no. And the consensus that we're hearing here is probably no. But if anybody knows of a standard that is genuinely useful, please message me. My email is nate@hvac20.com. If you know of something that you see that's really moving the market, I'd like to know about that. I really would. It's not that I'm closed-minded to it. It's just that I haven't seen it. In fact, one closing thought, Dr. Atul Gawande of the Checklist Manifesto, he was touring, it was one of the big medical organizations, and he was in the basement of a building in Switzerland, and there were these pallets and pallets of books. And he's like, so what are those? Oh, those are the new standards. Well, how new? Well, 4 years ago. How many have you shipped out? Not many. And so those standards books were not out there changing anything. We need something that's much simpler, more of a heuristic, which we can dive into the next time around. And then we'll take a look at some of the other orgs too. And thank you everyone for coming, and thank you for the kind words here at the end. And so we will see you next week, same bat time, same bat channel. And let's head for the after party, gents.
All right.
See y'all.
Good night, everyone.
Good night.
Right.